Well, thank you so much for joining us here on CBSNewsTexas.com. We're joined now by Keith Russell right now, talking about, Keith, a pretty sad day for sports, for the Cowboys community, for anyone who knew this man that we're looking at behind us. This is a legendary Hall of Fame executive for the Dallas Cowboys, Gil Brandt. We got word that he passed this morning at 91 years old.
Yeah, we got word, and Ken, I was right in the midst of doing our 9 o'clock newscast, and it started to come across our CBS 11 feed, and that's how we ended our newscast, with talking about what Gil Brandt meant. And for a lot of people, Ken, unfortunately, they don't know because so much time has passed. He was 91 years old. But when you think about what we know as the combine today in the NFL, where all these teams, they pick their talent based on, how fast some of these guys can run and how high they can jump and how many reps they can do of 225 pounds on the bench press. Well, way before that, Gil Brandt was the first talent person who measured players in ways that did not involve carrying a football. He went out and found a guy like Bob Hayes, who was an Olympic sprinter and went to Florida A&M University. He was a sprinter, and Gil Brandt found him and turned him into a Hall of Fame wide receiver. Drew Pearson played baseball, undrafted, ended up being a Hall of Famer. Cliff Harris, undrafted, ended up being a Hall of Famer. Of course, the great Roger Staubach. Gil Brandt discovered him too. He ends up being a Hall of Famer. Rayfield Wright, basketball player, Hall of Famer. I talked to Drew Pearson, Ken, today, and he even said, don't forget about Chuck Howley, because he just went into the Hall of Fame this year, along with DeMarcus Ware. And he said, if I'm not mistaken, Chuck Howley was a wrestler.
Yeah.
But he found people that nobody else would think would ever be great football players, and he knew with his eye. That's how great he was.
So on that point, right, that speaks to his ability to recruit. That also speaks about some of the magic that he sort of held when he would see these players, because, and we were talking about this earlier, back then in those early days, there was no social media. There was no, hey, send me a video, check out a TikTok or an Instagram post or anything of any of these kind of players. He had to, find them, go to where they were, set his eyes on it, and then really analyze them for what he saw. And as you mentioned, time and time again, he found stars.
There were no tweets. There were no threads. There was, I guess, an IBM computer back then.
There was one.
one IBM computer everywhere, and he had access to it. But he was the first executive, and he was the first talent person to bring computers into the equation when it came to evaluating talent. And yes, he traveled the country, and he scouted these guys. And he scouted them. When we talk about Cowboys football, Ken, we talk about Mount Rushmore. And right now, we have 4 faces on the Mount Rushmore we know. But if I were to say 4 faces of a Cowboys Mount Rushmore, I'm talking about Tom Landry.
Yeah, of course.
Late, great Tom Landry. Right. One of the greatest coaches ever. Greatest Cowboys coach ever. Tex Schramm, president of the Cowboys. Gil Brandt, the vice president of player personnel. And now I would have to include Jerry Jones, but Jerry Jones is the next wave. He is the wave after the initial wave. Yeah. But that, to me, would be the Mount Rushmore of the Cowboys. Gil Brandt is part of that Mount Rushmore, and he will always be, because if not for him, certain guys would never have even been NFL football players. Yeah. They would never have had a career.
And Keith, when you talk about sort of this impact that you've so colorfully illustrated for us of what he meant to the Cowboys and the game, what do you think executives nowadays could learn from a gentleman like Mr. Brandt?
Everything.
Yeah, really, everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Gil Brandt would still go to the Cowboys games on Sunday. When I was still over in the sports department, Ken, which was just a couple years ago, and I would go cover the Cowboys on Sundays, the game did not start until Gil Brandt wheeled himself into the press box at AT&T Stadium. That's how much he still loved the game. He wrote columns at his advanced age for NFL.com.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a league-sponsored website, and he's writing columns. That's how much respect he had, because You know what? People can draw up different plays and people can say, okay, television is bigger, the money is bigger, the exposure is bigger, the social media is bigger. But one thing that's not bigger is the ability and that innate ability and instinct that the great people have when it comes to saying, he's going to be a star.
Yeah.
Because he has that something. And talking to Drew Pearson on the Zoom, he said that Tom Landry would sing Gil Brandt out on the road, and he would say, you know what, they just have to have those four characters I look for, and that is character, that is intelligence, that is passion, and that is talent.
Ability.
And you see what I listed last?
Right.
Ability.
Yeah.
But it was character 1. It was intelligence 2. It was passion 3, and it was ability 4.
When you take a look back at the history of those early days of the Cowboys, you had to have those threes to volunteer or to agree to come out here and suit up for that team during that time, because obviously they were not the America's team that we know now.
No.
Back then, I mean, that was probably a hard sell to these guys like Drew Pearson, who played baseball, to come and play football for a little-known team called the Dallas Cowboys, who I think they used to play the practice field, I think, was on gravel back in those early days. So they had to have those things. And Gil Brandt knew where he could find them, and he could identify it when he would see it.
Hey, people don't remember the Cowboys used to play their games at the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
The Cowboys weren't always at Texas Stadium and then later at AT&T Stadium. That was the progression. But the Cowboys used to play their games at the Cotton Bowl. And you know what sign-in bonuses used to be? Sign-in bonuses used to be like
$200, right?
a couple $100.
Yeah, right.
And Gil Brandt would have to go convince these guys that if you come play for the Dallas Cowboys, you have not only a future, but Ken, you're not just going to have a football future. We are going to build something that is so powerful that you're going to have a future in business way after football. You think about all the Dallas Cowboys, and you think about all the retired Cowboys. You hear about Roger Staubach, and Roger Staubach is worth, upwards of $700 million. He didn't make that money. Most of these guys had summertime jobs.
They had to.
They had part-time jobs.
They had to, back in the day.
You didn't make that money. But that is what he taught them, how to be professionals, more so than just great football players. He taught not just X's and O's. He taught commitment to being a good person, being a good man, being a good father, being a good husband. He will forever be missed. I got a text from one of the players, Butch Johnson, who used to be a wide receiver, and he caught a touchdown in the Cowboys' second ever Super Bowl victory when they beat the Denver Broncos. And he just said 4 words. That's 4. He was my hero.
Yeah.
That's what he texted me.
There's so many people, I'm sure. We heard a little bit of the snippet of the interview that you did with Drew Pearson earlier, and he said even up to in his older age, his older years, he would love to just call him up and just say, hey, what about this guy? What about that guy? Because still into his 90s, he had that ability to be able to, come up with an opinion and an analysis on a player, something that Drew says that he's going to miss being able to do, because obviously that's not something he's going to be able to do anymore.
He found Drew. I mean, we remember when Drew Pearson a few years ago got denied getting into the Hall of Fame.
That was a heartbreaking moment. We were there.
Yeah, we were there. We were in his house.
Rolling.
We were in his house. I was in his house in Plano, and Drew Pearson, I mean, he had an outburst. And later he came back and said, that wasn't me. I apologize. I just got caught up in the moment. But he had waited so long. But guess what? He finally got in the Hall of Fame. And when he got in the Hall of Fame a couple of years ago as an undrafted, rookie that Gil Brandt found, along on the same weekend with Cliff Harris, an undrafted player that Gil Brandt found, guess who was there to support Drew Pearson? Gil Brandt. Wheelchair and all. Because he knows he found those guys. He'll forever be intertwined with the start of the Cowboys being viewed as America's team.
And I'll tell you what, I should probably move my chair a little bit, because I just noticed I'm covering him up in the picture behind us. But there he is with all these greats. I mean, this picture speaks to almost every point that you have made so far about just how great he is, the respect that he has, the love of his colleagues. And you talk about the Mount Rushmore, some of them are here.
Okay, you got Troy Aikman. You got Cliff Harris. Obviously, Troy Aikman won 3 Super Bowls. He's a Hall of Famer. You got Cliff Harris, undrafted.
Yeah.
Gil Brandt found him. He's a Hall of Famer. Charles Haley was not drafted by the Cowboys. Charles Haley came over in a trade from the 49ers. Charles Haley won 3 Super Bowls as part of the 90s dynasty. He won also 2 with the 49ers, so he won 5. Jerry Jones. Obviously, Jerry Jones will forever be synonymous with Cowboys football after the initial wave of Cowboys football. Michael Irvin, 3-time Super Bowl champ. Jimmy Johnson.
There's Jimmy Johnson.
You know, Jimmy Johnson started that back-to-back dynasty, and then he was succeeded by Barry Switzer, who won the 3rd of the Cowboys' 3 Super Bowl titles in the 90s. Tony Dorsett. I can even make him out. Heisman Trophy winner who came in as a rookie and won a Super Bowl with the Cowboys. Rayfield Wright. He was a tight end. He was a basketball player. Gil Brandt found him. He became a Hall of Famer as one of the best offensive tackles of all time.
Emmitt Smith.
Emmitt Smith, the all-time rushing leader. Mel Renfro, one of the greatest cornerbacks of all time. Gil Brandt, the architect.
There he is.
And Drew Pearson, who will forever be indebted to what Gil Brandt did for him.
And we can go on and on. I mean, that's just one photo.
That is just
just one photo.
That's one
when
photo.
When you think of the, what was it, almost 30 years, though, that he held that position?
Just about.
The most recent title.
About.
I mean, he obviously has more than that. But, I mean, and this is just one photo. Could you imagine if we went down 3 decades worth of photos of all the stories and names and things that could come out of that because of that gentleman right there?
Because one man had a vision. And yes, he shared that vision with Tom Landry. He shared that vision with Tex Schramm and one of the Cowboys' initial owners, Clint Murkison. But it was Gil Brandt who went on the road and found all that talent. And so when the Cowboys came as an expansion team, they were not one of the original NFL teams. When they came in as an expansion team.
Right.
And people were like, what is this? How can this succeed here? Well, guess what? The Dallas Texans also came along at that time. The Dallas Texans became the Kansas City Chiefs. Guess what? There wasn't room for both of them. Guess which team moved? The Dallas Texans moved to Kansas City. The Cowboys stayed here, and the Cowboys are now valued at $10 billion. They are America's team. But it didn't start with Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin and Emmitt Smith and Deion Sanders and Charles Haley. It started with guys like Gil Brandt. That's why he'll be missed so much.
Again, we could talk for hours here.
Yeah, we could.
Keith, thank you very much for the insight. Thanks for all of the data and the knowledge, the history dump on us. But again, all of it speaks to the legacy of one man today, and that is Gil Brandt, who has passed 91 years of age. Thank you all so much for watching here on CBS News, Texas.com.